Imagine waking up, um, walking into your brightly lit bathroom, and just looking into the mirror.
Right, something we do every single day.
Exactly. You blink, but your reflection doesn't.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You freeze.
Yeah.
Your heart is just pounding against your ribs. And then a full, impossible second before you even think about doing it, your reflection smiles at you.
It just completely shatters that fundamental agreement we have with physical reality. And it happens in a fraction of a second.
It really does. Welcome to this deep dive.
Oh.
Today, we are crossing into some, frankly, profoundly unsettling territory. We're examining this really chilling narrative called the mirror's replacement. And I want to be clear right up front. This isn't your standard, bump in the night ghost story.
No, not at all. It's much deeper than that.
Right. We are tracking a really meticulous, step-by-step progression of existential horror. We're going to look at the psychological terror of identity replacement, the complete loss of the self, and honestly, the horrifying implications of what actually happens when human beings attempt to cheat death.
The stakes here are just incredibly intimate because, when we usually talk about possession in popular culture, it's loud.
Oh yeah, like spinning heads and screaming.
Exactly. It's violent, it's chaotic, but the horror we're analyzing today is quiet. It's almost surgical.
That's a great way to put it. Surgical.
Yeah. It explores this terrifying concept that the human body is really just a vessel. And the soul, the thing we think of as our permanent, untouchable identity, is actually incredibly fragile. And terrifyingly, it's evictable.
Evictable. That is such a creepy word for it. So as we walk through this sequence of events, I want you, the person listening to this right now, to really think about a question.
A very difficult question, too.
Definitely. What is it that actually makes you, you? I mean, is it your catalog of memories?
Or maybe the specific cadence of your voice?
Right. Or even just the way your dog reacts when you walk through the front door.
Yeah.
If you strip away all those external anchor points, what is actually left?
It's a scary thought.
And what would happen if those anchors were slowly deleted one by one and completely overwritten by something else?
It's a thought experiment that really forces us to confront how much of our identity is just, well, a performance we've memorized.
So true. So let's look at how this nightmare actually begins. Because every catastrophe has an inciting incident, right?
Usually something that seems harmless at first.
Exactly. And this one is chillingly mundane. It's just a car crash.
Not a massive movie explosion either.
No, not a cinematic fiery pileup or anything, just a completely ordinary accident on an empty road late at night. But there is this one critical biological detail here.
The medical window.
Right. The protagonist's heart stops for almost 3 minutes before the paramedics manage to restart it.
Now, 3 minutes of clinical death in the medical realm, that is a massive window.
It feels like an eternity, right?
It really does. The brain is starved of oxygen. The whole biological machine just halts. Consciousness literally ceases.
Just darkness.
Yeah. But conceptually, in the context of this narrative, those 3 minutes represent an unattended door. The physical vessel is left completely vacant in whatever space exists between life and death.
Okay, so you come back from something like that, you expect a really difficult recovery?
Of course. Physical therapy, trauma.
Right. You expect the severe headaches, the nightmares, that's all standard trauma stuff. But the narrative presents this very subtle, deeply disturbing shift in the immediate aftermath.
The external rejection.
Yes. The external world basically starts rejecting the protagonist. And I don't mean people are just being mean to them or giving them the cold shoulder.
No, it's a visceral, almost biological rejection.
Exactly. Neighbors start staring at them with this weird hypnotic fascination, like they're almost drawn to them, but in a creepy way. Meanwhile, the people they actually know well, like close friends, they start smiling differently. They start treating the protagonist with this unnatural, immediate trust that just wasn't there before the accident.
We can actually view this through the lens of a bizarre inversion of the Capgras delusion.
Oh, wait, remind me how Capgras works normally.
Sure. So in typical Capgras syndrome, a patient genuinely believes that their loved ones have been replaced by identical imposters.
Right, like an alien replaced my husband.
Exactly. The visual data coming into their brain is correct, but the emotional connection is completely severed. So the brain just logically concludes that is an imposter.
Okay, I see.
But here, the phenomenon is externalized. It's the environment that is experiencing the cognitive dissonance. The social circle looks at the protagonist, and on a completely subconscious level, they register an anomaly.
So they know something is wrong, but they don't know why.
Right. And that unnatural trust you mentioned from their close friends, that is almost like a predatory glamour. The entity inside is projecting a false signal to pacify the herd.
To pacify the herd. Wow. That implies we are just prey.
In this context, we absolutely are.
And here's the thing about false signals. While humans might be fooled by them because of our heavy social conditioning, animals absolutely are not.
Animals do not care about social contracts at all.
Not even a little bit. The environmental reactions escalate wildly. Dogs start violently growling the absolute second the protagonist walks past them on the street.
Pure instinct.
Birds scatter.
Babies who have zero cognitive bias or social conditioning whatsoever start screaming the absolute second they make eye contact with the protagonist.
They just know.
They do. And the climax of this environmental rejection is just brutal. A stray cat outside their apartment hisses at them, like super aggressively, and then literally drops dead the next morning.
If we look at the biology of this, it makes a terrifying kind of sense.
Wait, really? How?
Well, animals possess incredibly sensitive chemosignaling capabilities. They can smell cortisol spikes, adrenaline, diseases, even genetic anomalies.
Like dogs that can smell cancer.
Precisely. They process the world through a much more primal, unfiltered lens than we do. When that dog growls or that infant cries, they aren't making a complex, rational judgment.
Right, they're not thinking about it.
Their survival instincts are just firing immediately. They are recognizing an apex predator in their space. That makes me think about the uncanny valley effect.
Whoa, that's a perfect analogy.
Right, because we usually apply that to robotics or CGI in movies. Like when something looks almost exactly human, but a tiny fraction of a percent is off.
Like a micro-expressions are just a bit too slow.
Yeah, or the eyes are dead. Our brain completely short-circuits and triggers revulsion. It's basically an evolutionary defense mechanism to keep us away from corpses or disease.
Keeps us safe.
Exactly. Now, apply that uncanny valley to a human soul. The physical body looks completely normal. The biological operating system, it boots up fine. But the underlying code is malicious.
The hardware is fine, but the software is a virus.
Yes. The biological antivirus of the natural world, all the dogs, the babies, they are throwing up massive red flags. They are literally screaming, do not trust this.
And taking that uncanny valley idea even further, your biological antivirus isn't just throwing up red flags, it's actually reacting to profound toxicity.
You mean the cat dying?
Exactly. The death of the cat pushes this way past mere unease. The entity isn't just spooky to be around, it is fundamentally antithetical to natural life.
It's like radiation.
That's a great way to put it. It's radioactive to the living world. The mere proximity to this usurped body is lethal to a small animal.
Which brings us to the first massive internal visual cue. This is the moment the horror crosses the threshold from the outside world directly into the apartment.
The safe space is breached.
Right. The protagonist starts noticing that every single mirror in their home just feels wrong. And then it happens. The reflection lags.
That specific visual, the delayed reflection, is just brilliant writing.
Why does it hit us so hard?
Because it targets the actual neuroscience of self-recognition. Human beings are one of the very few species on Earth that can pass the mirror test.
Like recognizing ourselves instead of thinking it's another animal.
Exactly. We rely heavily on mirrors to confirm our continuous existence and to map our physical boundaries in the world. So when the reflection moves independently, it creates a profound fracture in the mind.
Fracture?
Yeah, it is undeniable visual proof of a dual occupancy. Your brain simply cannot reconcile it.
It's the ultimate betrayal of your own senses. And this fracture, it accelerates into a complete loss of bodily autonomy.
It gets physical very quickly.
It does. The protagonist starts waking up in the morning completely covered in mud. Their shoes are soaked through. Their hands are literally bleeding from underneath the fingernails.
Digging.
Yes. And they have absolutely zero memory of ever opening their front door or leaving their apartment the night before.
Missing time is incredibly destabilizing for a human being.
I can't even imagine.
The continuum of consciousness is basically how we maintain our sanity. When you wake up with physical evidence of violence or heavy exertion like mud and bleeding hands, and you just have a blank space in your memory,
It's terrifying.
you are confronted with this terrifying reality that your physical form is being utilized as a tool by an unknown operator while your own consciousness is just powered down.
But hold on a second. Let me just pause here because I try to put myself in this person's shoes.
Sure, what would you do?
Well, if I wake up with bloody hands and muddy shoes after surviving a horrific car crash where my heart literally stopped, my first thought isn't, oh, a demon from the void is driving my body around.
Yeah, of course not.
Right. My first thought is that I have a massive traumatic brain injury. I'm thinking I'm in a fugue state. I'm thinking severe somnambulism, like sleepwalking, brought on by the massive trauma of dying.
That is the logical assumption.
So my question for you is, how long can a rational person really cling to medical science before they are forced to accept the supernatural?
Honestly, a very long time.
Really? Even with the bleeding hands?
Yes. The human mind has an astonishing, almost limitless capacity for denial when it comes to self-preservation.
I guess we want to protect our worldview.
Exactly. Accepting that an otherworldly entity has hijacked, your body shatters your entire paradigm of reality. The brain will eagerly, desperately accept a diagnosis of severe brain damage over supernatural possession. Because brain damage, while terrible, still operates within the known laws of physics. It can theoretically be treated. The protagonist almost certainly tried to rationalize all of this as trauma-induced sleepwalking at first.
But that rationalization completely collapses when they check their
Wow,
phone.
the digital evidence.
Yes. They find videos on their camera roll that they have absolutely no memory of recording. Videos of themselves, out in cemeteries, in the dead of night.
And it's what they're doing in the videos that's so disturbing.
Right, because they aren't running around or crazily digging up graves like a zombie.
Yeah.
They're just standing there, completely motionless in the dark, facing the headstones and whispering to someone underground.
The stillness in those videos is a really critical detail to analyze.
Why is this stillness so important?
Because somnambulism, normal sleepwalking, usually involves rudimentary automatic tasks. Walking around, opening doors, sometimes eating from the fridge.
Mostly mindless stuff.
Exactly. It lacks complex, directed intent. Standing perfectly still in a specific remote location and holding a whispered conversation. That indicates a highly focused, highly conscious operator.
And the audio evidence on those videos is what finally obliterates the medical explanation.
You can't unhear it.
You really can't. While reviewing these graveyard videos, the protagonist actually hears a response. A voice from beneath the dirt answers back, whispering two distinct words: wrong body.
That audio recording shifts the crisis entirely.
It changes everything.
It really does, because you cannot easily rationalize a secondary external voice recorded on a digital device that is actively responding to your sleeping body. It moves the whole narrative from an internal neurological trauma to a verified external invasion.
It's proof.
And furthermore, the phrase wrong body is highly revealing.
Oh, interesting. How so?
It indicates a network or community of these entities. The thing in the grave recognizes the entity that's currently inhabiting the protagonist, and it refers to the human form merely as a body.
Like an object.
Yes, just a vessel, an incorrect container for whatever is actually inside it.
So you are officially just a passenger in your own vehicle. Your physical reality in the daylight is rejecting you. So what do? The logical human response to trauma and fear is to retreat.
Hide under the covers.
Right. You lock the door, you hide, and you go to sleep. But what happens when the entity realizes that sleep is your most vulnerable biological state?
It uses it against you.
The night terrors escalate exponentially. The protagonist describes these horrible, suffocating dreams of drowning in pitch black water. And as they're sinking into the dark, they look up and see another version of themselves standing above the surface.
The usurper.
Yeah, standing there perfectly dry, just smiling and watching them drown.
It's a very precise psychological metaphor that's been constructed by the parasite.
So it's doing this on purpose.
Absolutely. It is showing the host consciousness exactly what is happening to it in real time. The black water represents the suppression and the eventual suffocation of the human soul, and that smiling reflection, that's the usurper, calmly observing the final moments of the original occupant.
That is so bleak. And the terror bleeds right out of that dream state into physical sleep paralysis.
The 3:11 a.m. awakening?
Yes, every single night.
Yeah.
At exactly 3:11 a.m., the protagonist wakes up completely frozen. They can't move a single muscle, they can't scream, and there is a figure standing in the corner of their bedroom.
A classic sleep paralysis demon initially.
Initially, yeah. Tall, incredibly thin, its face completely hidden in darkness. For a few nights, it just stands there and watches. But then the physical breach occurs.
This is where it crosses the line.
The entity moves from the corner of the room, leans right down beside the bed, places its face right next to the protagonist's ear, and whispers, "He let me in."
Think about the evolutionary purpose of a bedroom.
It's supposed to be safe.
It is supposed to be our ultimate sanctuary. Sleep requires us to power down our defenses completely. We are biologically mandated to be helpless for a third of our lives.
We have no choice.
Right. By invading that specific space, the entity is eroding the very concept of sanctuary.
It's like realizing an intruder isn't just trying to pick the lock on your front door. It's realizing the intruder already has the master keys. They've locked the door from the inside, and now they're just standing in the dark.
Waiting for you to fall asleep so they can take over.
Exactly. And the proof is undeniable. The morning after the entity leans over the bed, the protagonist looks in the mirror and finds unidentifiable fingerprints bruised all around their own throat.
Physical evidence again?
Fingerprints that do not match their own hands.
The entity is systematically weaponizing rest. Because sleep is a biological necessity, the protagonist is being forced into a daily surrender.
You can't just stay awake forever.
You can't. The narrative specifically notes that every time the protagonist falls asleep, they wake up feeling farther away from their own body.
Ugh, that phrasing, farther away from their own body.
It's a war of attrition. The entity doesn't need to engage in a violent, waking struggle. It just needs to wait until the host's body reaches exhaustion and naturally shuts down.
So, you are being besieged in your own bed. You have some entity's fingerprints bruised into your neck, and your reflection is operating on a time delay. Mainstream medicine has completely failed you. Where do you go?
You seek out the fringes.
Right. The protagonist drives way outside the city to find this outcast priest, someone the community actively avoids.
Which is actually a brilliant, desperate move.
Really? Why do you say that?
When you are experiencing a phenomenon that blatantly breaks the laws of physics, taking it to a hospital or a psychiatrist is useless. They will only try to treat the symptoms of your supposed psychosis.
They'll just give you pills.
Exactly. The protagonist intuitively understands that their survival depends on finding someone who already speaks the language of the impossible.
And the priest's reaction confirms absolutely everything. The absolute second he lays eyes on the protagonist walking up to him, he freezes in his tracks.
No greetings.
None.
Wow.
No pleasantries at all. His very first question is, how long has it been wearing you?
Notice the specific terminology he uses there. Wearing you.
Yeah, it's chilling.
The human body is reduced to a garment. Just an accessory for this thing.
The protagonist tries to cling to the rational one last time. They tell themselves, oh, he just means the trauma of the car crash is wearing me down.
Still trying to deny it.
But the priest brings out a handheld mirror. He places it directly in front of the protagonist's face and gives a really simple instruction. Do not blink.
The mirror test.
For a few seconds, everything in the glass looks totally normal. And then the reflection smiles. The physical body hasn't moved a single muscle, but the face in the glass is grinning.
The visual of the reflection acting independently is conceptually terrifying because light is still physically bouncing off the mirror, right?
Physics of the mirror are still working.
But the visual information being returned is malicious. The entity has control not just over the physical biology, but over the metaphysical projection of the host.
The protagonist stumbles backward in absolute horror.
Yeah.
But the priest looks even more terrified than they do, and he delivers this massive, paradigm-shifting diagnosis.
Truth comes out.
He whispers, your soul came back wrong.
Wow.
He explains that when people die briefly, when they enter that 3-minute void during cardiac arrest, the void isn't empty.
It's crowded.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This thing inside them isn't the ghost of a dead human. It's not some Christian demon. It is something ancient and incredibly hungry that just exists in the infinite, silent darkness between life and death.
This fundamentally alters the cosmology of the entire narrative.
How so?
Death is no longer a final destination. It is a porous border, a doorway. And if you stand in that doorway for 3 minutes, the things lurking in the dark can see you. They can reach out.
They notice the open door.
Right. The priest explains that this entity has been incubating inside the protagonist ever since the accident. It has been systematically studying them,
Learning them.
learning the exact cadence of their voice, mapping out their memories, cataloging their deepest fears. It is an ancient apex predator that utilizes perfect mimicry to hunt.
Perfect mimicry. And that mimicry is about to be completely weaponized. The priest asks if the protagonist has been losing time, if the mirrors are acting strange.
Checking the symptoms.
The protagonist nods. And the priest just looks at the floor, completely defeated, and says, it's almost finished replacing you.
The diagnosis is terminal.
And right on cue, the entity initiates a total system override. The climax of this church scene is just a masterclass in sensory deprivation and psychological subversion.
It really is.
The lights and the candles inside the church suddenly flicker, and then they go out completely. Pitch black.
Stripping away the visual sense heightens the terror of the auditory and the tactile senses.
You rely on your ears now.
Yes, the darkness is the entity's preferred environment. It's taking away their sight to isolate them.
Out of that darkness, the protagonist hears their own voice speak, but it's coming from somewhere behind them.
Disembodied.
The voice calmly says, "Don't tell him." The priest immediately drops to his knees and starts praying frantically. His hands are just shaking.
He knows what's in the room with him.
The protagonist can hear bare feet scraping on the stone floor, slowly circling them in the dark. And then something touches the back of the protagonist's head.
This part is so upsetting.
But it's not a violent, aggressive grab. The touch is described as incredibly gentle, almost lovingly.
That specific detail, the gentle touch, is arguably the most disturbing moment in the entire encounter.
I have to ask why. What does that gentleness actually say about the entity?
It demonstrates absolute, terrifying confidence. Think about it. A predator only uses violence when it needs to subdue struggling prey.
Like a lion taking down a zebra.
Exactly. But if an animal is already caught firmly in the teeth of a steel trap, the trapper can handle it as gently as they please. It isn't going anywhere.
Oh, that's dark.
The entity does not view the protagonist as a threat anymore. It views them as a completed project. It is admiring the fit of its new vessel.
And that is exactly when the body officially stops belonging to the protagonist. They're completely paralyzed, but horribly fully conscious.
Trapped in their own mind.
They can see, they can hear, but their motor functions are entirely hijacked. Their arms lift into the air completely on their own. Their jaw unhinges, opening all by itself.
Puppet string.
Yes, and using the protagonist's own vocal cords, literally pushing air from their own lungs, the entity whispers to the praying priest, "He already gave me permission."
Such a powerful line.
And as a final show of dominance, as the priest steps back in pure terror, the protagonist's reflection suddenly appears right behind the priest, standing in the dark, smiling, without the physical body having moved an inch.
It's a flawless demonstration of omnipotence within this localized reality. The entity is just flexing its control over the physical and the metaphysical.
Just showing off.
But that phrase, "he already gave me permission," is the true psychological knife twist here.
Because it blames the victim.
Yes. It introduces the concept of consent into the horror. It implies that the protagonist is not entirely a passive victim, which layers immense guilt right on top of the terror.
So once the diagnosis is out in the open like that, the entity drops all pretense of hiding. The stealth phase is totally over. We move into the phase of total, irreversible erasure.
The final stage.
The entity shifts gears from external manipulation, making the dogs bark or the mirrors lag, to internal destruction. It begins systematically deleting the protagonist's memories. And it happens violently.
This actually brings us to a fascinating and deeply disturbing philosophical concept.
Oh, lay it on me.
The philosopher John Locke proposed that personal identity is entirely founded on consciousness and memory.
Okay, so I am me because I remember being me.
Exactly. You are who you are because you have a continuous memory of your experiences. If your memories are entirely erased, the entity that remains is no longer you, even if the biological body is identical.
That makes perfect sense.
The entity understands this perfectly. By deleting the memories, it is not just causing brain damage, it is executing an existential assassination.
An existential assassination?
Sure.
Wow. And the narrative is brutal about what specifically gets deleted. We're not talking about forgetting a grocery list or an old computer password.
No, it goes after the foundations.
It targets the foundational pillars of a human life.
Hmm.
The protagonist realizes they can no longer picture their mother's face.
Devastating.
The layout of their childhood home just evaporates. The names of their closest friends are just gone. It's like a hard drive being wiped sector by corrupted sector.
It's a very apt analogy.
Think about how terrifying that actually is. If someone breaks into your house and steals your car while you're sitting in the passenger seat, you are a victim of a physical crime.
You lose property.
Right. But if someone is sitting next to you and literally deleting your knowledge of how to drive, where you live, and what your own name is.
The physical loss of a vehicle or even a body is a biological tragedy, but the erasure of memory, that is total annihilation.
You just cease to be.
You possess the meta-awareness that you are ceasing to exist, but you are actively losing the vocabulary and the context to even understand the loss. You are literally watching yourself evaporate.
And the physical encounters in the apartment become deeply surreal as this erasure is happening. The protagonist wakes up to find a silhouette sitting perfectly still at the very end of their bed.
A usurper again?
They instinctively reach for the bedside lamp, and a voice speaks.
Mm.
And the audio design of this nightmare is just horrifying. The voice comes from both the entity sitting on the bed and the protagonist's own mouth
Mm.
simultaneously.
Wow.
Don't turn the light on.
A stereophonic assertion of total dominance.
Stereophonic, yeah.
The barrier between the parasite and the host has dissolved to the point where they literally share a vocal output. The entity is declaring that there is no longer a you and an it. They are merged.
But the lamp clicks on anyway. Panic instinct, I guess. And the bed is empty. There's no silhouette. But the tall mirror next to the closet tells a very different story.
The reflection isn't empty.
The reflection is still sitting on the reflection of the bed. And it's smiling. It raises a finger to its lips, telling the protagonist to stay quiet. And then it does the impossible.
It breaks the rules completely.
The reflection stands up inside the mirror, turns its back, and walks away, deeper into the reflection of the apartment.
It breaks the fundamental optical law of mirrors. A reflection is entirely dependent on the physical subject standing in front of it.
That's just how light works.
Right. By acting independently and walking away, the entity is explicitly declaring that it is now the primary subject. The physical protagonist left sitting on the bed is merely the leftover hollow shell waiting to be fully discarded.
And as the protagonist stares into that glass, trying to process this, they realize the reality inside the mirror is fundamentally wrong.
It's distorted.
The reflection of the room is much larger than the actual physical apartment. It stretches out into these impossible, endless, dark hallways.
An inner labyrinth.
And inside those hallways, there are people standing motionless, just watching through the glass. Hundreds of them.
The discarded versions.
Some look perfectly human, some are horribly distorted, half-formed, like clay that hasn't been molded right. But every single one of them has the protagonist's face.
That visual is highly symbolic and incredibly terrifying. Those distorted, half-formed versions represent the entity's practice attempts.
Practice, like it had to rehearse.
Exactly. Mimicking a human consciousness flawlessly isn't instantaneous. It requires trial and error. The entity has been generating these imperfect copies in the mirror dimension, refining its performance, tweaking the psychological parameters.
Getting the voice just right.
Yes. Tweaking until it achieved the perfect, smiling replica that is now actively taking over the real body.
And the entity doesn't just use visual horror here. It actively weaponizes human grief. The front door of the physical apartment suddenly disappears, completely replaced by a wall of solid darkness.
Trapping them.
And from that darkness, the protagonist hears a voice. Their mother's voice. And remember, she died 3 years ago.
Such a cruel tactic.
And the voice sounds absolutely perfect. Warm, real, and utterly terrified. She whispers, "Please help me, it's dark here."
This is a devastating surgical tactic.
Because it targets the heart.
Exactly. The entity has downloaded the protagonist's memories. It sifts through the mind, locates the absolute deepest, most vulnerable well of unresolved grief, and uses it as bait.
It knows exactly what hurts the most.
It understands exactly how grief physically alters the brain's pathways. It makes us desperate for connection and highly susceptible to emotional manipulation.
And the copies in the mirror, they all smile wider when she says it because they know it's working. The protagonist realizes the entity is just scrolling through their brain, finding exactly which voices to use to break their will.
Breaking the spirit before taking the body completely.
And then the horror becomes deeply physical again. It's not a sharp pain this time, it's movement.
The tactile hallucination, or reality in this case.
The protagonist feels fingers, long and thin, slowly pressing against their ribs, but from the inside, pressing outward, like they are trying to get out.
The physical imagery is profoundly invasive. The entity is literally hatching from within the chest cavity.
Hatching, that's gross.
And the psychological message delivered by those smiling copies in the glass is crystal clear. It hurts less if you stop fighting.
Just give up.
The entity wants a willing surrender. It is trying to convince the host that annihilation is a merciful relief compared to the agonizing exhaustion of continuous resistance.
Which catapults us right into the apocalyptic finale. We move from this intimate, claustrophobic setting of a locked apartment into full-blown, mind-bending, cosmic horror.
The scale shifts dramatically here.
The apartment begins to shake violently. The temperature plummets until the protagonist's breath literally freezes in the air. The hundreds of copies in the mirror all declare in unison, your soul is opening.
The final breach.
And then, reality simply tears apart. The ceiling of the apartment physically splits open. But it's not the plaster and wood of the roof above them. It is a massive tear into infinite, silent darkness.
The scale of the narrative expands exponentially. We are finally given a direct glimpse into the void that the priest warned about earlier.
The space between life and death.
Exactly.
The visual is staggering. Through the torn ceiling, floating in this endless dark sea, the protagonist sees thousands of human shapes, like drowned souls suspended in black water.
It's a haunting image.
Some are screaming silently, some are praying, some are smiling that unnatural delayed smile. And the horrifying realization hits. These aren't trapped human souls.
No, they are not.
They are empty bodies. They are discarded vessels just waiting to be worn by whatever is out there.
It completely recontextualizes the entire human experience.
It makes it seem so small.
It suggests that our reality is surrounded by an invisible, infinite ocean of predators that view human bodies merely as hermit crab shells.
Hermit crab shells. That's exactly what it is.
They are just waiting for a moment of biological vulnerability. A cardiac arrest, a coma, a car crash. Just waiting to snatch a new home.
And the architect of this specific nightmare is finally revealed. Far below all those floating bodies, something enormous shifts in the darkness.
The true form.
The source material says it is too massive to even fully comprehend. Its body is composed of thousands of human faces pressing outward from its skin, stretching the membrane, whispering endlessly in 1,000 stolen voices.
An amalgamation of stolen lives.
This is the ancient thing, the apex predator wearing stolen souls, and as it moves, it opens countless eyes, and every single eye looks directly down at the protagonist.
The revelation of the entity's true form is designed to induce a sense of absolute insignificance.
You can't fight that.
Against a creature of this age, this scale, and this insatiable hunger, what possible chance does a single, terrified human consciousness have? It is a battle lost before it even began.
And as this ancient, godlike amalgamation stares down at them, the final twist of the narrative drops.
The memory unlocks.
The copies in the mirror all drop to their knees like worshippers. The massive entity smiles with hundreds of faces simultaneously. And in that moment, the protagonist's final log memory opens. They finally remember the absolute truth about the car crash.
This is the moment the narrative shifts fundamentally.
It really does.
It goes from being a story about being hunted by a monster to a story about being caught in a trap of one's own making.
The crash wasn't an accident. The protagonist remembers looking out the windshield seconds before the impact and seeing the tall, shadowy entity standing right in the middle of the empty road. Waiting and smiling. The entity deliberately caused the crash. And while the protagonist was ejected from their body, clinically dead for 3 minutes, floating in the void and watching the paramedics frantically perform CPR.
The entity was right there.
It was standing right there beside them in the dark. It extended its hand, and the protagonist took it.
Not because I trusted it, because I was afraid to disappear.
That line.
That might be the most profoundly tragic sentence in the entire narrative.
I have to stop and ask, like, a massive philosophical question here, because the copies in the mirror chant, "You already opened the door." The giant entity whispers in 1,000 voices, "You invited us first."
The question of consent.
Yes. Can you genuinely, morally call it permission or consent if the choice presented is between taking the hand of a demon or ceasing to exist entirely in the cold void of death? Was it an actual choice? Or was it a cosmic trap built specifically to exploit our deepest biological instinct?
It is unequivocally a trap, and it highlights the ultimate tragedy of human instinct.
Our need to survive.
The imperative to survive is the single strongest force in our biology. It is hardwired into our oldest brain structures. It completely overrides logic, reason, caution, everything.
We just want to live.
The entity understands this biological flaw perfectly. It creates a horrific ultimatum where the only alternative to complete, terrifying annihilation is a seemingly benign offer of salvation. Just a hand in the dark.
But it's coerced.
Exactly. But that coerced consent is the metaphysical loophole the entity requires to successfully cross the threshold into our reality. The true horror isn't just the monster itself. It is a dark commentary on the supreme vulnerability created by our sheer, desperate need to keep living.
The moment they chose to survive at any cost, a vital part of them stayed behind in the dark, and that choice seals their fate permanently.
The closing of the trap.
The broken mirror in the apartment begins growing across the walls like a spreading infection of black glass. It covers the floor, it crawls up the ceiling, and finally it spreads rapidly over the protagonist's own skin.
Archiving them.
The reflection smiles one last time without them, and the victim realizes the ultimate horror. They are never escaping. They aren't dying. They are being consumed and archived.
The black glass consumes them entirely. It permanently locks the remaining sliver of their consciousness away in the void, while the entity takes absolute control of the physical life on
The
Earth.
replacement is complete.
It is a perfect, seamless transition.
Let's pull all of this together. We've journeyed from the subtle, uncanny unease of a reflection moving a second too late, through the systematic erasure of a person's foundational memories all the way up to this mind-bending cosmic nightmare.
Becoming a silent, empty vessel in a sea of stolen identities.
It is a phenomenal exploration of escalating dread.
It really is. It systematically strips away every single layer of comfort we possess as humans.
Layer by layer.
The validation of the social environment gone,
Yeah.
the biological sanctuary of sleep weaponized, the authority of religious intercession useless, the reliability of our own memory deleted, and finally, the autonomy of our physical body hijacked.
So why does this specific narrative stick with us so deeply? I think it taps into a primal fear that we almost never actually vocalize.
The fragility of the self.
Exactly. The fear that the self is incredibly fragile, that our identity is just temporary, and worse, that it could be perfectly replicated by something else.
A mimic.
If something can mimic your voice, download your memories, and replicate your emotions so perfectly that not even your closest friends can tell the difference, then what exactly is the unique value of the original you?
It directly challenges our deeply held belief in our own uniqueness.
We want to feel special.
We desperately want to believe that our soul is an indelible, irreplaceable fingerprint on the universe. But this narrative suggests the complete opposite.
That we're just software.
It suggests we are merely software running on organic hardware. And just like any software, we can be deleted and overwritten by a superior, more aggressive program.
It's an incredibly terrifying thought. And it leaves us with one final, deeply unsettling question to mull over. Something for you all to think about tonight.
I know what's coming, and I don't like it.
Every single night, we do exactly what the protagonist feared most. We walk into our bedrooms, we lie down, we close our eyes, we fall unconscious, and our minds just drift off into the dark.
We tower down.
We willingly surrender control of our physical bodies. And when the alarm goes off the next morning, and we wake up and we drag ourselves into the bathroom and look in the mirror, how can we be absolutely 100% certain that the consciousness looking back is the exact same one that went to sleep?
You can't. You only have your memories to rely on, and as we've clearly seen today, memories can be downloaded.
Oh, that's awful.
Perhaps that slight delay you see in the mirror tomorrow morning isn't just tired eyes.
And we will leave you with that comforting thought.
Mm-hmm.
Until next time.